Picture a field. Not a golden Instagram field with wildflowers and soft light. A real one. 200 yards of mud and dung and grain that might kill you if it dies before you can bring it in. Your back has been aching for 3 days. Your hands stopped feeling individual cuts around day 6. Now it's just one long burning sensation from wrist to fingernail. Your clothes haven't been washed in 6 weeks. The sky has been the colour of old pewter for 11 days straight. And here's the part nobody puts in the movies. You don't own any of it. You've worked this field your entire life. Your mother worked it before you. Her mother before her. The grain you're cutting right now, 1/3 goes to the Lord, 1/10 goes to the church. What's left? You will grind and stretch and pray over all winter, hoping it holds long enough to keep you alive until the ground thaws. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. That's always been the deal. And if the rain doesn't stop, if the harvest fails, people die. Not metaphorically, actually die. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists admiring the tapestries or watching knights joust. We're living it. One day, one woman, everything she would have seen, smelled, feared, and survived. So I make these history sleep stories, and honestly I have no idea if any of you are actually sleeping, or if you're just lying there feeling grateful you were born with central heating and the legal right to leave your job. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. Just not the comfortable darkness of a room with blackout curtains and a charging phone casting a faint glow across the ceiling. Not any kind of darkness with a single thread of light under the door, or the distant orange of street lamps through thin curtains. This darkness is absolute. You have been alive for 22 years and you have never woken up to anything else. This is what night looks like, what it has always looked like, what it will always look like until the day you die. For half a second you don't know where you are. Then you know. The smell tells you. It always tells you first. Smoke. That's the top note. Wood smoke specifically, from the fire that burned lower overnight, and the particular kind of stale smoke that settles into thatch and wool and hair and doesn't leave. It's not unpleasant exactly. It's just there. The way the walls are there. The way the ground is there. You were born breathing this smell. Underneath the smoke. The animal smell. The cow is in the far corner of the building. Your end of the house, if you can call it that, is where the family sleeps. Her end is where she lives, which is convenient in winter because she warms the room and you warm her. A partnership of shared survival that neither of you chose and both of you depend on. She's moving now. You can hear her shifting weight, the soft knock of her hooves on the packed earth floor, the low sound in her throat that means she's hungry, and she knows it's morning and she expects someone to do something about it. Underneath the animal, the people smell. 5 people in a room the size of a modern garage. Your mother, your brother Thomas, who is 16 and smells like what 16-year-old boys smell like in any century. Your sister Bess, who is 8 and smells mostly of mud. And next to you, your husband, Will. Will smells like himself. Sweat and wood shavings and the faint metallic smell of the bill hook he carries all harvest season. You've been next to this smell for 3 years. It's as familiar to you as your own hands. And underneath all of it, underneath every other layer, your own smell, your own body, unwashed in weeks, your own hair, your own clothes that have not left your body except at mass for as long as you can remember. Welcome to a village in the north of England. The year is 1315. You don't know it's 1315, of course. You don't know years like that. You know it's the reign of King Edward II. You know it's the 3rd year of his reign, which has so far been something of a disappointment to most people who've had opinions about it. You know it's the feast of St. Michael coming up, which means Michaelmas, which means the quarter-day rents are due, which means you're about to have a very difficult conversation with whatever bailiff the Lord sends to collect them. But first, you have to get up. The floor under your bare feet is cold. Not cold like a tile floor on a winter morning, cold like the ground itself, which it is. Packed earth, covered with a thin layer of rushes that haven't been changed since midsummer, and now smell of everything that's happened in this room since midsummer, which is quite a lot. Your joints ache when you stand. They always ache in the morning now. Your knees, the base of your spine, the particular ache in your right shoulder from the angle you've been swinging a scythe for the last 11 days. You're 22 years old. Your body is much older. You pull your outer dress over your head. You sleep in your shift, a long linen undergarment that is essentially your one constant companion in life, washed maybe 4 times a year whether it needs it or not. And you tie your girdle around your waist, the belt that marks the boundary between dressed and undressed in this world, and you find your shoes in the dark by touch. Leather, thin-soled, already beginning to separate at the seam on the left one. Will said he'd fix it last week. He hasn't yet. You make a note to remind him, which you have been making for 5 days. Your hair needs dealing with. This is actually a significant part of your morning, because hair that isn't properly contained is hair that gets caught in things like threshing equipment and spinning wheels and the spokes of the cart you'll be loading later. But it's also a matter of decency. A married woman's hair is supposed to be covered. The Bible says so, the church says so, the village says so. You find your coif in the dark, the white linen cap, and pin it in place. Under it your hair is braided tight against your head. Brown hair, fine hair, hair that is still slightly damp from the sweat of yesterday's work. Then you go to deal with the cow. Her name is Brindle, because she's brindle-coloured, a brown and cream pattern across her back, and she is the most valuable thing your household owns. Worth more than the house, which you don't own anyway. Worth more than the tools. Worth more than a year's wages for Will. She gives you a look when you come to her end of the room, a cow look, reproachful, patient. The look of a creature who has decided that waiting for you to sort yourself out is simply what her mornings consist of. You scratch behind her ear, which she tolerates. You check her water, which needs refilling. You pull a chain tether to check its holding, not because she'd run, but because if she got out into the road this morning there would be consequences you cannot afford right now. Consequences measured in lost time and possibly fines from the Lord's court, because that's how things work here. Everything is connected to the Lord's court and the Lord's fines and the Lord's opinion of what constitutes your responsibility. The cow is fine. The cow is always fine. The cow is more reliable than everything else in your life. You leave her to her patience and go to wake the fire. The fire never fully goes out. This is important. This is genuinely, life-alteringly important. A fire that goes out completely in winter means cold. Cold means illness. Illness means death. In a world where the closest thing to a doctor is a monk 3 miles away, who knows some Latin and has strong opinions about bloodletting, and the closest thing to medicine is the dried herbs your mother keeps in a pot above the door, and the particular prayers she says over them, which may or may not be entirely orthodox. But more than that, A fire that goes out means you have to go get fire from somewhere else. The neighbours, if they're generous. The manor house, if they're not. And going to the manor house for fire means you owe a favour, means you're in debt, means one more small thread of obligation wrapped around your wrist. So the fire is banked every night with care. Ash piled over the coals, and every morning you kneel in the ash-grey pre-dawn dark and you blow. Your knees on the cold rushes, your face close to the hearthstone, your breath going out in a long, slow, careful stream, and the coals wake. Orange, then brighter orange, then almost white at the centre where the heat lives. You feed it carefully, twigs first, the thin dry ones you keep in a bundle by the wall, protected from the damp. Then slightly larger sticks. Then, and only when the fire has committed itself to living, a piece of actual wood. The fire has opinions about being rushed. You've learned to respect them. And by the time the fire is going properly, your mother is up. She moves in the dark the way people who have navigated the same 12 feet of floor for 50 years move, without hesitation, without looking, with the perfect automatic certainty of muscle memory. She doesn't say good morning. Good morning isn't really a concept here. You say it at Mass on Sundays sometimes, and even then it's more of a liturgical gesture than a genuine observation. In the morning you're both just there, doing what needs to be done, the way the sun is there doing what it does. She goes to the corner where the grain is stored. She looks at it. She looks at it the way you've been looking at it every morning for 2 weeks. There's a calculation happening behind her eyes. You know this calculation. You can do it yourself now. How much grain is in this pot? How many people in this house? How many days until the harvest comes in? How many days those two things need to bridge? This morning her face does something you don't like. Just a small something. A slight tightening around her eyes. A press of her lips. She takes the ladle and measures out what she takes out. A little less than yesterday. You don't say anything. She doesn't say anything. Bess is stirring in the corner, and Thomas is making the sounds of someone who knows he should be awake and is hoping nobody has noticed he isn't. And the cow is registering a quiet, ongoing complaint about the water situation. And outside, beyond the wattle and daub walls of your house, which is the only house you've ever known, which is 12 feet by 18 feet and contains your entire world, outside the village is waking up. You can hear it. The sound of doors, the sound of animals, the sound of people whose names you know. All of them. Every single one of them. Because this is a village of 63 people, and you have known all of their names since you were old enough to learn them, the living and a good number of the dead. Because the dead are still present here in a way they are not in cities. Their names spoken at Mass every week, their faces visible in the faces of their children. Outside, the sky's beginning to do the thing it does right before dawn, going from black to the very deep blue-grey that is not yet light, but is the closest thing to a promise of it. The harvest won't wait. You eat before you go. Eat is a strong word. What you do is take your portion of the pottage your mother has made from the grain, and the small dried peas that are running low, and will be gone before the fortnight is out, and you eat it standing up because there aren't enough stools for everyone to sit, and you eat it fast because the light is coming, and there is work to do, and every hour of daylight is an hour that can be measured in grain brought in, or grain lost. The pottage is warm. That's the best thing you can say about it. Warm and thick, and your mother has put in some dried herbs. Fennel, she grows it herself, against the south wall of the house where it gets the most sun. and the smell of the fennel in the warm steam of the bowl is one of those small perfect things, the kind of thing you don't have a word for because nobody's thought to invent the word yet. But what it is comfort. A tiny fist-sized piece of comfort in the middle of everything. You swallow it fast. You hand the bowl back to your mother. You go outside. The cold hits your face like a cloth wrung out in cold water. Your breath comes out white. It's the kind of morning that makes your hands curl instinctively into your sleeves. But you can't afford that because your hands need to be working. So you uncurl them. You shake them loose. You walk toward the field and you let the cold in. The village around you is doing the same thing. Doors opening, figures emerging. The blacksmith, John, old John. He's been called Old John since he was 40 and now he's genuinely old. 62, which is ancient. Which is the kind of age that makes people watch you with a slight wariness as though you've done something suspicious by still being alive. Old John is standing in the doorway of his forge watching the sky with the same expression your mother had looking at the grain pot. You know what he's reading. You've learned to read it too. The sky to the west is doing something with its clouds that means rain. Not today, maybe not even tomorrow, but rain coming. The colour of it. The way the clouds are stacked in layers. The smell of the air which has taken on that particular cold metal smell that means wet weather on the way. You have maybe 2 days, possibly 3. 2 days to bring in what's left of the harvest. And 2 days is not enough, and you know it, and old John knows it, and everyone walking toward the fields this morning knows it. And none of you say it out loud, because saying it out loud would make it real in a way that makes working harder rather than easier. So you walk, and you don't speak, and your breath makes white clouds in the cold air, and around you the village pours itself toward the field like water finding a crack in stone. The field in the half-dark before sunrise is a different place than the field in full light. In the light, it's a field. Hard work. You can see what you're doing, and what you're doing is hard, and your back hurts, and the grain is heavy, and the stubble cuts your ankles when you're not careful. But in this light, this low purple-grey light, with the mist sitting in the hollows of the ground, and the sky just beginning to have ideas about becoming morning, the field is something else, something older. You know every inch of this ground. You know the soft spot near the north end where there's a spring underground that makes the soil waterlogged in wet years and produces grain that rots at the root. You know the ridge along the east side where the soil is thinner and lighter, good for barley, difficult for wheat. You know the corner where the blackthorn hedge comes in close and the rabbits run from, and you have to check the snare line every morning before work, and sometimes there's something in it and sometimes there isn't, and the mornings when there is something in it are mornings that feel like gifts. This morning there's nothing in the snare. You reset it with practiced hands, loop, pull, test the tension, and stand up and look at the field. There's a lot left to bring in, too much. You don't let yourself think that for more than a second. You take your position in the line. The other women and men of the village are spreading out along the edge of the grain, taking their places with the quiet efficiency of people who've been doing this exact thing, in this exact formation, since they were old enough to hold a tool. Your scythe is your scythe, not the Lord's scythe that you borrowed because you owed him labour. Your scythe, which Will made for you the first year you were married, the handle fitted to your height, and the angle of your swing, which he knew, because he'd watched you work for the whole year before he asked your father for permission to ask you, and which is one of the things you like best about him, that he watched you work and made a tool that fit how you work. The handle is smooth from your hands. You know every grain of its wood. You take it up, you set your feet, and you begin. The sound of a scythe cutting grain is a sound that has no modern equivalent. It's not a sharp sound. It's a sound with weight to it. A soft, dense shh as the blade goes through the stalks, and then the whisper of them falling, and then the almost silent landing on the ground, heavier than you'd expect, the way a bundle of living things always has more weight than you think. You cut and you gather and you bind. Cut and gather and bind. Your hands move without your mind needing to direct them. Your back swings with the motion. Your hips turn with each stroke. This is the motion your body was built for, or rather, the motion your body has been shaped into by 20 years of doing it. The muscle and the bone and the slight curvature of your spine all organised around this specific task. Your hands ache, not a sharp pain. A deep, pervasive ache that starts at the base of your thumbs and runs up through your wrists and into your forearms. The skin over your knuckles is tight and cracked. Last night you rubbed goose fat into the worst of the cracks before you slept, but in the cold of this morning they've opened again, and you can feel the faint warmth of blood at the edges. You don't stop. To your left, Marjorie. Marjorie is 41 years old and has 6 children, and has been working this field for 30 years, and she moves through it like something mathematical. Like a machine, if you knew what a machine was. She doesn't hurry, she doesn't slow down. She moves at exactly the pace she's calibrated to sustain from dawn to dusk, and at dusk she's still moving at that pace, while people half her age have been stumbling for the last 2 hours. You try to match her pace. You've been trying to match her pace for 3 years. You can't do it yet. To your right, Agnes, not you, another Agnes. Agnes Tanner, the tanner's wife, a big-shouldered woman with red hair and an expression of total concentration. And beyond her, Will. Will works differently than the women. He's stronger, obviously. His strokes go deeper. He cuts a wider swath, but he tires faster. This is true of all the men. They sprint and rest. The women maintain. At the end of 12 hours, the women have usually moved more ground. Will catches your eye across the line. He doesn't smile. There's nothing to smile about right now, but he does something with his face that means you're all right. And you do something back that means yes, and then you both go back to cutting, because there isn't time for more than that. An hour passes. 2. The sun comes up properly and the mist burns off, and the field becomes real and present and immediate, and smells of grain dust and exertion, and the particular sweetness of ripe wheat, releasing itself into the air as you cut through it. Your feet are wet through your shoes from the dew on the uncut grain. Your hem is soaked to the knee. The cold of the wet fabric against your legs is just another part of the morning. You eat nothing at midday. There's nothing to eat at midday. This is the fast season, not religious fast. Just the season between when last year's provisions run out and this year's harvest comes in. The lean between time, the hungry time. Your mother's calculation with the grain pot this morning was not just economic. It was survival arithmetic. You drink water from the bucket that Bess brings down from the well at midday. Bess is 8, and this is her job, the water carrying, and she does it with a seriousness that you love her for, because you know how heavy that bucket is relative to her body, and you know she doesn't complain about it. She watches you drink, standing very still. "Will we have enough?" she asks. She means the grain. She's 8 years old and she's asking this question. "Yes," you say. You say it without hesitating, the way you learned from your mother. You says things confidently to children, not because confidence is always true, but because the alternative is a child too frightened to sleep. Bess nods. She picks up the bucket. She walks back toward the well. You watch her go. You go back to cutting. By mid-afternoon, when the light has that particular gold over amber quality that means the day is in its last third, something changes. Not in the sky, not yet, but in the air. You feel it before you understand it. A shift in the pressure. The air going slightly still in a way that isn't peaceful. It's the stillness of something gathering, something building itself out beyond the horizon where you can't see it yet. Old John is standing at the edge of the field when you look up. He's looking west. You look west. The clouds there have changed colour. The stacking you saw this morning has become something else, something lower, something with a definite edge to it, a line between the ordinary grey and a darker, yellower grey that means business. 2 hours, old John says to no one in particular. Everyone hears him. Everyone looks. And then, without a word being spoken, without any foreman or bailiff telling you what to do, because you don't need one, because you all know what this means and what it requires, the pace of the whole field changes. It doesn't just get faster. It becomes something else, something concentrated, something with a current running through it. The thwack of the scythes changes rhythm. The bundles are bound faster, less neatly. There's no talking now. There's only the work and the light and the sky turning slowly and inexorably toward the colour of threat. Your hands stop feeling like your hands. They become instruments, purely functional. Cut, gather, bind. Cut, gather, bind. The ache in your back climbs from discomfort to a genuine bright pain that shoots down your right leg with certain angles of the swing. But you've learned how to work around that angle, how to adjust the stroke so it doesn't hit that nerve, and you make that adjustment and you keep going. Marjorie, to your left, is magnificent. She moves like water now. Absolute efficiency. No wasted motion. Every stroke exactly where it needs to be. Will, to your right, has abandoned his sprinting rhythm. He's found something steadier. He's cutting for his family now, and he knows it, and it shows in the set of his shoulders and the angle of his jaw and the way he doesn't look up at all, not even when you pass near enough to touch. The children are involved now too. Even Bess, who came back from the well and saw the sky and understood without being told, is working at the edge of the field, picking up the loose heads of grain that fall from the bound sheaves, collecting them in her apron. This is gleaning, the ancient right of the poor, the very poor, the landless, the most desperate, to collect what falls. Bess isn't gleaning technically. This is her family's grain. But the motion is the same. Small hands in the stubble. Nothing wasted. The sky turns yellow-grey. The air smells like metal now. Old John says one word. Carts. The carts come. 2 of them, the village carts that are shared because nobody can afford their own. Pulled by oxen that lean into the yokes with the patient power of creatures who don't have an opinion about the weather but do have an opinion about direction, and that opinion is forward. The sheaves start going in. You're loading and stacking. Your arms are shaking slightly now, not from fear, but from the accumulated labour of 2 weeks expressing itself in the moment your body has asked for more than it has left. You dig deeper. You always find something there when you dig. It never gets less surprising. Some room below the room you thought was the last room. Some reserve your body held back without telling you. The first drops of rain come when there is still grain standing. Not many drops. A scout party. The sky testing itself against the ground. But then 15 minutes later the real rain. It doesn't begin gently. so it comes in full and cold and immediately. The grain that is still standing will be ruined if it stays. Grain lying in rain and mud is grain that rots. You know this in your body the way you know nothing else. You keep going in the rain. You're soaked through within minutes. Your dress weighs twice what it did dry. The linen clinging to your legs, the coif over your hair plastered to your skull, the water running into your eyes and off the end of your nose and down the back of your neck in a stream that touches every single part of the nerve that's been painful all day. You keep going. Everyone keeps going. Because this is the grain. This is winter. This is whether the children eat or don't eat. This is whether you make it to spring. You keep going until the last standing grain is cut, until the last sheaf is thrown onto the cart, until old John walks the field one more time in the rain, looking at the ground, looking for anything left, and finds nothing, and straightens up and says, "Right, just right." And that's it. That's the harvest. Whether it's enough. That's the question you carry home through the rain, soaked and shaking and more tired than you can account for, while the cart wheels throw up mud, and the oxen breathe steam, and around you the village processes itself back toward the houses with the subdued, collective relief of people who have just run a race, whose finish line is not the end of the danger, but merely a pause in it. You change your clothes at home, or rather you change your outer dress, because the shift underneath is also wet. But there's only one of those and it needs to dry before you can wear it again, so you hang it by the fire and put the dry outer dress on over your bare skin, which is its own particular sensation. The rough dry linen against skin that is cold and slightly raw from the rain, and you stand close to the fire while your mother puts more fuel on it, and you both listen to the rain hitting the thatch above your heads. The sound of rain on thatch is something specific. It's not the sound of rain on roof tiles or slates. It's a softer sound, more layered. You can hear each individual raindrop finding its place in the interlocked reeds and settling there, and underneath that the sigh of the whole structure adjusting to the added weight of water. Your roof is 2 years old. Will rethatched it himself, which took a week and cost you a debt to the Lord for the reeds, which came from the Lord's meadow. You both watched it go up with the specific combination of pride and anxiety that attaches to things you've built under conditions you couldn't control, and every rain since then you listen the same way. Is it holding? Is it holding? Tonight it holds. Thomas comes in, wet through, shaking like a dog. He's 16 and made of angles, elbows and knees, and a jaw that hasn't decided where to settle yet. He eats more than anyone else in the house, and apologizes for it with his eyes every time he takes his portion, which is not something your mother has ever said to him, but which he's absorbed from the air of the place, from the arithmetic of the grain pot. "Did we get it all in?" he asks. "Most of it." "Most?" You look at him. He's old enough for the unvarnished version of things. The last 2 rows on the north end. The rain came before we could get to them. He's quiet then. "How much is that?" "Maybe a bushel, maybe 2. He does the calculation. You can see it happening behind his eyes. He's good at the calculations. He gets it from your mother. He doesn't say anything when he's done, which tells you he's arrived at the same conclusion you have. Maybe enough. Maybe not quite. It depends on the winter. It depends on the dues the Lord takes. It depends on the price of things you can't control. Maybe. Your mother puts supper on. She doesn't acknowledge any of this. She makes supper. The pottage tonight has a small piece of salt pork in it. A real piece. Actual meat. Because it's harvest end. Because you've been working for 2 weeks. Because the body needs something more than grain and peas to do what the body has been asked to do. The taste of the fat in the broth. the way it coats your tongue, the salt of it. You eat slowly. Will is next to you on the bench, and after a moment his hand finds yours under the table, and you sit together eating in the warmth and the firelight and the sound of the rain, and it's not happiness exactly. Happiness is too light a word for what you feel, too unweighted, but it's something solid, something real, something enough. 3 days later, the bailiff comes. You hear him before you see him. Horses on the road, which is a sound that means nothing good in this village, because the people in this village don't have horses. Horses belong to lords and bailiffs and clergy and people who travel, which is to say, people with power. And as 2 horses, 2 riders, the bailiff, whose name is Robert de Weston, and his assistant, a young man whose name you've never learned, and who carries the ledger in which your debts to the Lord are recorded. Robert de Weston is a tall man, thin-faced, in his 50s, wearing a hood against the mud. He's not a cruel man exactly. You've met cruel men, and he doesn't have that particular quality of finding pleasure in what he does. But he's not a kind man either. He's an efficient man, an accountant, a collector of what is owed. The feelings of the people he collects from are not part of his calculation. He stops in the centre of the village at the well, which is where people stop when they want to be seen and to see. The village comes to him, not because anyone wants to, because the alternative is not going to him. And the consequences of not going to him are considerably worse than going to him. You go with Will. Your mother comes too, because the dues are assessed on the household. You should understand what you owe, because this is how this world works. And if you don't understand it, you don't understand anything about why the village has the particular quality it has. The slight lowering of the eyes when authority passes. The way people take slightly more careful steps when men on horses appear. You are a villain. That is the word for what you are, though you wouldn't use it about yourself. You'd say you're of the manor. You're of Sir Edmund's holding. You're Thomas's daughter and Will's wife and Agnes of Bramcote. But the law says, villain. A villain is not exactly a slave. The Church has been very clear about this distinction, which is somewhat reassuring, except that the practical difference between being a villain and being a slave is less obvious than the Church's clarity suggests. You cannot leave the manor without the Lord's permission. Your father couldn't. His father couldn't. The land your family works was granted by the Lord's ancestors to your ancestors in exchange for labour and service, and that grant is inherited, and the labour is inherited, and the obligation is inherited, and the only way out of it is to buy your freedom, which requires money you don't have, or to run to a town and stay there for a year and a day without being caught, which requires luck and distance, and the ability to find work without references or connections in a city that has no reason to welcome you. 3 people from this village have run in living memory. One was caught and brought back. 1 died on the road before he got anywhere. A woman named Edith, who left 6 years ago, and whose name is still spoken in certain ways, like the beginning of a sentence that nobody finishes. Nobody knows what happened to Edith. You are not Edith. You have a husband. You have a mother who is 52 years old and cannot do without you. You have a sister who is 8. You have the cow. So you are here, in the centre of the village, with the mud drying on your shoes from the harvest field, waiting to hear what you owe. Robert de Weston opens his ledger. He reads, Your Heriot, the payment due when a villain's father dies, a kind of inheritance tax, except the inheritance goes to the Lord, not the family, so it was paid 3 years ago when your father died. That's settled. Your chevage, The annual head tax for being who you are, which is to say the tax for existing in your current legal status, is due at Michaelmas, 4 pence, which is not nothing, not when a day's agricultural labour earns a penny and a half, which means 4 pence is nearly 3 days of wages. Your merchant, the fee you paid when you married, the permission fee, the Lord's right to charge you for the privilege of starting a family without his express approval, that was paid 3 years ago too, also settled. Your boon works. The labour you owe the Lord's fields, 3 days a week during harvest, 1 day a week the rest of the year, in addition to any special works called at the Lord's pleasure. And the grain. The grain is the part that makes your chest tight. The Lord takes 1/5 of all grain produced on the strips your family holds. This is the arrangement. This has always been the arrangement. 1/5, measured out and loaded onto the Lord's carts and taken to the Lord's granary, regardless of how the harvest went. Regardless of whether 1/5 of what you produced is the amount that stands between you and not enough. Robert de Weston estimates. He's done this for 20 years. He can look at a village's harvest the way a butcher looks at a carcass. He sees the portions immediately where the cuts will fall. He speaks a number. You're very careful not to look at will. The number is the number. There's no negotiating it. The Lord is generous. Or rather, the Lord's steward who gave Robert his instructions was prudent, in that the due is 1/5, and not 1/3 or 1/2. But 1/5 of a harvest that is already at the edge of enough is a subtraction you feel all the way through your body. Will says, "Yes, sir," because that's what you say. Robert makes his mark in the ledger. His assistant makes his mark. They move to the next household. You and Will walk back toward your house without speaking. Half a minute. Then Will says, "Lo," not looking at you. "We'll need to buy grain before December." "I know." "From the market." "I know." A pause. The mud squelches under your feet. Above you, the sky's doing its flat grey thing that it's been doing for a week, the sky that is neither threatening nor welcoming, just present, just weather. "It'll be all right," Will says. He says it the same way you said it to Bess, with the same confidence that has more to do with what it's necessary to believe than with what the evidence supports. You take his hand. "It'll be all right," you say back, and you go home to deal with the cow. Market day comes on a Thursday, and the nearest market town is 4 miles away. 4 miles is not far if you have a horse. You don't have a horse. 4 miles on foot, on roads that are, in October, in the north of England, in a wet year, not so much roads as suggestions, intentions of roads, dreams that roads had once about what they might become if conditions improved. Ruts 6 inches deep filled with muddy water, stones that look like footing and aren't. The particular kind of slippery that happens when clay has absorbed all the water it can possibly hold and begins returning it to the surface as a kind of surrender. You wear your good shoes, which are the same shoes as your working shoes because you only have 1 pair, but you cleaned them with tallow last night and they're as good as they're going to get. You carry 2 things, a basket in which there are 4 eggs, carefully wrapped in straw, because eggs are fragile and worth the care, and a small bundle of flax thread that you've been spinning in every spare moment for the past 3 weeks. Thread sells. Not well, not at the price that makes the spinning feel worth the hours it took, but it sells, and you need the coin. Will can't come. One of you needs to stay with the strips, with the cow, with the preparations for winter. You go with your mother, who has been to this market for 40 years and knows every stall keeper and every shortcut and every place on the road. where the footing looks solid and isn't. Bess comes too because Bess needs shoes before winter, and the cobbler in the village is cheaper than the market cobbler, but the village cobbler is away visiting his brother in the next village and won't be back until next week. And Bess's shoes have a hole that is already causing problems that can't wait for next week. The three of you set off in the grey morning. You walk single file on the worst stretches of road, your mother first because she knows where to step, then Bess, then you. The cold comes up through your thin soles with every step on the muddy ground. The sky presses low and the trees on either side of the road shed their last wet leaves in the still air. Bess talks. She always talks on the road, which is fine, which is good, because it occupies part of your mind and lets the rest of it do the grinding background work of calculation. What you have, what you need, what the eggs will fetch, what the thread will fetch, whether that covers the grain, whether it doesn't, and if it doesn't, what you do next. If there's a ribbon seller, Bess says, can I look? You can look, your mother says. Can I touch? You can touch if you ask. What if it's the fat ribbon woman who doesn't like being asked? Your mother considers this. Then you look without touching. Bess accepts this ruling. She hops over a particularly deep rut, lands cleanly, continues. 8 years old, sturdy as a gatepost. More energy than makes any physical sense given what she eats. And you love her with a fierceness that occasionally frightens you. The town announces itself gradually. First there's more traffic on the road, other people heading the same direction, a man with a pig on a rope, the pig conducting itself with the resigned dignity of a creature that knows where it's going and has opinions about it. A woman carrying a bundle on her back bigger than she is. 2 young men walking fast, deep in conversation, not looking at the road. The kind of confidence in movement that comes from knowing the road so well you don't need to watch it. Then the smell changes. More smoke, more animals, more people. Then the sound. Even from a quarter mile out, a market in full swing has a specific sound. Not any individual noise, but the compound of all the individual noises. The constant background roar of hundreds of transactions happening simultaneously. The human sound of commerce and negotiation and dispute and laughter, and the particular high cry of vendors who have been selling the same thing in the same place every Thursday for so long that the cry has become something between language and music, and then you're in it. The market square is the centre of the town, a church on one side, always a church. The church is always watching, the church is always present. A row of permanent shops along another side, and the market itself filling the open space between them, and his stalls and tents and open spreads of goods laid on cloth on the ground, and animals tied to posts, and people moving through all of it with the specific purposefulness of people who know they have 1 day a week to accomplish everything that can't be accomplished in their village. You've been to this market dozens of times. You know it the way you know the field. But it's still, every time, always, it does something to your breath when you walk into it. A slight quickening. Not excitement exactly. Something more like, this is the world, and I am in it. Not the world of your village, which is 63 people, and a field and a church, and the Lord's long shadow over everything. The world, the travelling world, the world that has more in it than you can see from your doorstep. Because markets draw from everywhere. The town is 4 miles from your village, but people come from 20 miles away to sell and buy, and some of those people, the merchants, the larger dealers, have come from further still, from York sometimes, from the coast. Once, memorably, 2 years ago, a man who said he'd come from Flanders, which your mother said was a place across the sea, which was the first time you'd ever really thought about the sea as a real thing and not just a story. The Flemish man was selling dyed cloth, purples and deep reds and a blue that you still think about sometimes, the exact blue of a sky after rain, and it cost more than a month of your work and you didn't buy it and you weren't going to buy it, but you touched it. The texture of it is still in your fingertips, smooth and dense and slightly cool. Not today, though. Today you're here to sell and buy, and the margin between the two is narrow enough that there's no room for lingering at cloth stalls. Your mother goes to the grain dealer. This is her territory, her negotiation. She's been buying grain from this man's father and then this man for 20 years. And the relationship has the particular quality of a long understanding, which doesn't mean warmth, exactly, but means something like a reliable structure that both parties have committed to not demolishing out of mutual interest. You find the woman who buys thread. She sits in the same spot every week, a stout woman of about 50 in a brown hood, with scales on the table in front of her, and a way of looking at what you bring that is completely expressionless, which is a skill, you've realised, a professional skill. If she looked interested, you'd ask more for it. If she looked unimpressed, you'd undersell yourself to fill the silence. The expressionlessness is its own kind of negotiation. You put your bundle on the table. She weighs it. She examines a few lengths of it, running it through her fingers with the automatic assessment of someone who has handled thread for decades. She looks at the tension of the spinning. She looks at the evenness of the thread, the consistency of the twist. You spun this by firelight every evening for 3 weeks, and the firelight is not great for seeing evenness, and there are sections that are uneven, and you know it, and she knows you know it, and you watch her find exactly those sections because of course she finds them. 2 halfpenny, she says. This is less than you wanted, less than you need. It's good thread, you say. The twist is even, it'll hold. She says nothing. She doesn't argue, she doesn't agree, she just holds the expressionlessness like a shield. 3p, you say. 2 3 farthings, she says. Final offer. You take it, because it's Thursday, and the market only runs until noon, and there isn't another thread buyer here you trust more, and the coin is real, and the calculation in your head says 2 3 farthings plus the egg money, plus the thread money, maybe equals enough for a 1.5 bushels of grain, which is maybe enough if you're careful, if the winter isn't long. She hands you the coins and you close your hand around them and you feel the weight of them, the warmth of them from her hand. 3 small pieces of silver that represent 3 weeks of evenings by the fire when you could have been resting and weren't. Now, worth it. The eggs sell for a penny farthing, which is what eggs sell for in October when everyone has too many eggs from the summer glut and not enough from anywhere else, and you take that coin too and hold it alongside the others. Then you find Bess. She's standing in front of the cobbler's stall with the careful stillness of a child who's been told she can look but not touch, and is taking this instruction very seriously. The cobbler is a young man, about Thomas's age, with a serious face and a very neat way of working, his last between his knees, a small knife moving with quick, precise strokes. Bess needs shoes. The cobbler measures her feet. She stands very straight for this, very solemn, as though being measured is a formal procedure requiring her full dignity, and names a price. You have a moment. You need the grain money more than you need new shoes. The logic of the body in winter says otherwise, says cold feet are dangerous feet, says a child without proper shoes. In November is a sick child in December, and a sick child in December is a worry you can't afford. But you need the grain too. Can you mend the old ones, you ask? Just for now. He looks at the old shoes which Bess has produced from her apron where she was carrying them. He looks at them with the detached professional assessment of the thread woman. I can put a sole piece on them, he says. Hold another month, maybe 2. How much? A farthing. A farthing is 1/4 of a penny. A farthing is almost nothing. Yes, you say immediately before you can talk yourself into the new shoes. He works quickly, right there on the stall, the small hammer tapping. Bess watches with total absorption. A farthing's worth of work for a farthing, no more, but clean work, done well. And when Bess puts the mended shoes back on her feet, she stands with slightly more confidence than before, and you feel the farthing well spent. Your mother finds you near the bread stall. She looks at you. You look at her. This is a language, the look language between your mother and you, and what it says in this case is, I got what I could. Did you? What she says aloud is, ready to go. The 4 miles home feel longer than the 4 miles there. They always do. Your feet know how far they've come and begin expressing opinions about the return journey around mile 2. The basket is lighter now, which is a mixed blessing. Lighter because you sold what you came to sell, but also not full of the things you needed to buy, because the money from the selling didn't quite reach the fullness of the buying. Your mother bought 1.5 bushels of grain. You needed 2. You walk the last mile in silence, the 3 of you, single file again on the muddy road. The market sound fades behind you. The smoke from the town fades. The particular sounds of your village, the familiar sounds, old John's hammer, the voices of the children by the well, the complaint of someone's pig, come toward you gradually. The way home always comes back to you when you've been away, assembling itself from its component sounds before you can see it. Will is by the door when you come up the path. He sees the basket. He sees your face. He doesn't ask. He just holds the door open. You go in. The church is every Sunday. This is not optional. Non-attendance at Mass is a matter of church law, and Lord's custom both, and the priest keeps a record, and the record is consulted, and missing Sunday service without a reason the priest accepts as legitimate has consequences. But you would go anyway. This is important to understand. You'd go anyway, not because of the law, but because Sunday is the one day of the week when the relentless forward motion of work, the cutting and carrying and spinning and cooking and mending and hauling and all the rest of it, pauses for a moment, and the pause is itself a kind of grace. Father Edmund has been the priest of this parish for 23 years. He's a round, tired man in his 50s who has said this same Mass so many times that he says it the way your hands cut grain, without needing to think. The body knowing what to do while the mind is elsewhere. His Latin is correct. His sermons are practical, which is something you've come to appreciate as you've gotten older. He doesn't preach about the great theological questions of the age. He doesn't preach about the heretics being burned in other places for opinions about the nature of the Eucharist. He preaches about not stealing your neighbour's grain, paying your tithes, being kind to the poor, which is somewhat ironic given that most of the congregation is the poor. But he also does this. He reads the prayers for the dead. Every Sunday, the names, your father's name, every week, has been read for 3 years now. John, son of William, not forgotten, not alone in whatever the next place is, whatever it is, named. There's something about this that undoes you slightly every time. Not grief exactly, or not only grief. Something more like the acknowledgement that the dead are still part of this, still present, still owed the attention of the living. your father's name in Father Edmund's tired, precise voice. You close your eyes when he reads it. The church smells of stone and tallow, and the wool of 50 people standing close together in an enclosed space. The floor is cold through your shoes. The light comes through 2 small windows, insufficient and beautiful. That grey-gold morning light falling across the carved stone of the font, and the worn wooden pew ends and the faces of the people around you. Marjorie is 3 people to your left. You can see the particular set of her jaw that means she's praying for real, not just going through the forms, whatever Marjorie is asking God for, and she's asking it directly and with total conviction. The Lord is not here. Sir Edmund, the lord of this manor whose name is the same as the priest's, which is confusing but unremarkable, Edmund being a common name, Sir Edmund comes to the manor for Easter and for Michaelmas, and occasionally for hunts, but not for ordinary Sundays. This is his local church in the sense that he built it, and his family's arms are carved in the stone above the north door, but it's your local church, in the sense that it's where your baptism happened and your marriage happened and your father's burial happened, and where, eventually, your own burial will happen. Your name will be read from that list one day. Your children's voices will close their eyes when they hear it. You try to imagine this and find you can't quite reach it. Not because death feels unreal. Death is very real here, very present. Children die, adults die. The thin margin between surviving and not surviving is something you feel in your hands every day. But your own particular death is still too abstract. You stop trying to imagine it. You say your prayers. Outside, after Mass, the village assembles itself in the small churchyard in the cold October air, the way it does every Sunday, the way it has done every Sunday for as long as there's been a church here. Not because anyone organises it, just because Sunday is the one moment everyone is in the same place at the same time, and information moves in the gathering, and social life happens and disputes are aired. And the web of obligation and kinship and long history that makes a village rather than just a collection of houses, that web is maintained. Old John stands with his wife by the east wall, their backs to the stone for warmth. Alice the dairymaid has had a baby. You heard yesterday you'll go and see them tomorrow. There's a proprietary knowledge among the women of a village about pregnancies and births, a tracking of who is how far along, a quiet network of assistants that doesn't need to be named to function. And near the gate, Will Tanner, not your Will, the other Will who is Marjorie's husband's cousin. Will Tanner has been told by the bailiff's man that his holding is to be reassessed. This moves through the gathering like a stone through water. A holding reassessment means the Lord Steward has decided the rates on Will Tanner's strips need reviewing, which almost certainly means upward, which means more grain, which means you look at your will. He's already heard. He's already doing the calculation. If the Lord is reassessing the Tanner holding, he may reassess others. The logic of lordship doesn't require individual justification. It's sufficient that it can be done, and if it can be done, it may be done. Will catches your eye. His face says nothing, but his hand finds yours briefly under his coat. Sunday continues. The cloud cover thickens. Someone's child falls and scrapes a knee on the churchyard wall and cries the sharp, surprised cry of a hurt child, immediately followed by the soothing sound of a parent. Father Edmund locks the church door. The village disperses. You go home to rest while there's still light. The wise woman lives at the edge of the village. Not the absolute edge, not outside the village bounds, which would be something quite different, quite specific in its implications, but the far side, on the lane that leads toward the mill, in a house that is smaller than yours and smells differently. Her name is Ida. She's been at the edge of the village your whole life. She was here when your mother was young. There are people who say she was here before even that, but this is probably the kind of story that attaches to women who know too many things. People need a story for that. It makes them more comfortable. What Ida knows is plants. This sounds simple. It isn't simple. It's the accumulated knowledge of a practice that goes back so far its origins have disappeared into the time before writing, before even the memory of the oldest person's oldest memory. What grows, what heals, what harms, what in combination with what. The difference between feverfew taken as an infusion and feverfew taken as a concentrated preparation. The very precise moment in the plant's life when its properties are strongest. The harvesting and drying and storing and preparation that determines whether what you make is medicine or nothing, or worse than nothing. You go to Ida when Bess gets the cough in November. November, and the cold has settled in now like an uninvited guest who's brought his belongings and is not planning to leave. The cough is the wet cough that starts in the chest, not the dry one that starts in the throat. The wet one is the one to worry about. The wet one is the one that kills children. You know this. Every mother in this village knows this. You go before dawn, before the household is properly awake, because if you wait for morning and there are other people on the path, you'll feel the watching eyes. Not hostile necessarily, just watching. Because the women who go to Ida in daylight are making a declaration, and declarations have a way of being remembered. The path to Ida's house is familiar enough that your feet find it in the dark. She opens the door before you knock. You've heard other people say this about her, and attributed it to the story building that happens around her. Now you think she just has good hearing and light sleep. The inside of her house is the smell you've always associated with the idea of knowledge, though you didn't have the concept for it then. Dried herbs, dozens of them, hanging in bunches from the rafters so thick they form a canopy. The fire burning with something different in it. Different wood, or herbs in the fire. Something that gives the smoke a greener, stranger quality than ordinary wood smoke. Pots along one wall, carefully labelled with marks you know are letters but can't read. Ida is 60-something. Small. Precise in her movements the way Marjorie is precise in the field. No motion wasted, every gesture having exactly the purpose it needs to have. Her face has the specific quality of faces that have been paying careful attention to the world for a long time. Not soft, not hard, but absolutely present. Sit down, she says. You sit on the stool by the fire. Tell me. You describe the cough. Its sound. Wet. Wheeze productive. Deep in the chest. When it started, 5 days ago, worsening. Whether it comes with fever, yes, slight at night. Whether Bess is eating, less than usual. Ida listens without expression. When you're done, she goes to the shelves. Time, she says, reaching for a bundle. The tea, 3 times a day, not just twice. She reaches for something else. And this, elecampane root. Boil it in the broth. Doesn't taste like much, but it helps the chest. And keep her by the fire, not in the draughts. She wraps these things with the same neat efficiency she applies to everything and hands them to you. How much, you ask? There's a pause. What have you got, she says. This is the question. Ida doesn't always take money, and this is part of what makes her position what it is. She accepts what people have. Sometimes that's coin. Yeah, sometimes it's labour, sometimes it's cabbage. Sometimes it's the knowledge that you owe her, which is worth more than coin. Because it means you'll come back, you'll tell your children to come to her, the relationship will continue. I can bring eggs, you say. Next week, 4 or 5. She nods. You stand to go. At the door, you turn. Will she be all right? Ida looks at you. There's a kind of honesty in her look that you don't always want, but you always need. It doesn't promise you things. It doesn't reassure you with words that are bigger than the truth. Keep doing what I said, she says. She's strong. You can hear it in the cough. You can hear it in the cough. You hold on to this. You walk back in the dark, the bundle of herbs wrapped in your apron, your breath white in the cold air. Bess's cough begins to loosen by the 3rd day. By the 6th, she's arguing about whether she has to stay by the fire. You let her argue. You keep her by the fire anyway. Winter comes the way it always comes. Not as a single event, but as a slow accumulation. First the mornings where the water in the basin has a skin of ice that you break with your fist. Then the days when the sun never really gets above the horizon, just offers a pale suggestion of itself from the south, and disappears before the afternoon can properly begin. Then the first hard frost, which takes the last of the kitchen garden, the frost coming in the night quiet and precise, turning the last green things in the ground to limp, blackened ghosts of themselves. Inside, the house contracts around the fire. You spend the short winter days spinning and mending and spinning. The distaff under your arm and the spindle dropping and spinning, the thread thickening between your fingers, and the slight drag of the twist as the yarn forms, and the rhythm of it, which is its own kind of meditation, its own kind of prayer, your hands doing the thing your hands do while your mind does whatever it needs to do. You think about things in the spindle rhythm, about the grain and whether it'll hold, about Bess's cough, which is better but not gone, about the holding reassessment, which turned out to affect only 2 households, not yours, which was relief mixed with guilt at the relief, about the child. You haven't told anyone yet. It's too early to tell anyone. The first 3 months are the dangerous ones, and you know this the way every woman here knows it. In the body, not as abstract knowledge, but as practical understanding of odds. But you know. You've known for about a month. Your body has opinions, and it's been expressing them, mostly in the early mornings, at the fire, when you're blowing the coals back to life and the smell of the ash is doing something your stomach strongly objects to. Will knows. You told Will last week, sitting by the fire after your mother and Thomas and Bess were asleep. You told him quietly, the way you say things you're not sure you're allowed to be certain about yet. He was very still for a moment. Then he took your hand and held it in both of his and didn't say anything, which was the right thing, the exactly right thing, and you sat together in the firelight while outside the first real snow of winter came down quiet and steady against the thatch. January. And the world is very small in January. The house, the lane to the well, the lane to the church, the field which is frozen and fallow, patient as stone under its cover of snow and ice, doing whatever fields do in winter, which is wait. You wait too. The rhythm of winter is different from the rhythm of summer. Summer has urgency. Harvest has terror. Winter has something more like endurance. You get through it. You stay warm enough and fed enough, and you keep the fire going, and you keep the cow alive, and you wait for the light to start coming back. Thomas reads. This is the thing about Thomas that the village finds slightly baffling. He learned his letters from Father Edmund 3 years ago. Father Edmund, who has a more generous understanding of education than some priests, who taught a handful of the village children to read on the grounds that reading the scriptures would make them better Christians, which was true. though the side effect of this argument is that they can now also read other things, such as the Lord's written records, which is not something the Lord had opinions about before it happened and now has opinions about. Thomas reads everything he can get his hands on, which, in this village, isn't much. A psalter borrowed from the church, a book of saints' lives borrowed from the priest, a worn-out almanac that someone brought back from the market town, and that Thomas has read so many times the covers are coming away. He reads aloud sometimes in the evenings, the saints' lives especially. He has a gift for it, the right pace, the right emphasis, and you all listen, even your mother, who can't read herself but has strong opinions about whether Thomas is reading well. There's a story he reads sometimes about St. Bridget, a woman who built a community, who organised the labour and care and spiritual life of a whole place. A woman who argued with bishops and won. A woman who, according to the story, hung her wet cloak on a sunbeam because there was nowhere else to hang it. This last part you find both impossible and completely plausible. You've never met a sunbeam that was useful in a practical way, and yet somehow you believe, reading it by firelight in January, that Bridget probably could. Thomas reads it well. The fire pops and settles. Outside the snow comes down. February. Something shifts in February. Always. A degree or two of temperature. The light coming back incrementally. The day's still short but no longer shrinking. You begin to show. This changes things. Not dramatically. Not in any way that's said aloud. But the way people look at you changes. Or rather, the quality of attention changes. Women you pass in the village square make eye contact and then lower their eyes in a way that means I know, and I'm thinking about you, and I hope it goes well without any of those things needing to be said. Marjorie asks after your health one morning by the well. This is Marjorie, who does not usually make personal inquiries. Fine, you say. Tired. The second month is the worst for the tired, she says. After that it gets better. This is advice from experience. Marjorie has had 6 children and lost 2 of them. And the ones she lost she doesn't speak of directly, but you know which ones they were from the names that aren't read at Mass. Thank you, you say. Get more sleep if you can, she says, and picks up her bucket and walks back toward her house. Will starts doing more. Not in any dramatic way. Not in a way that would embarrass either of you by calling attention to itself. But he's the one getting up to deal with the cow in the mornings now, and when there's a heavy load to carry, his hands are there before you need to ask. This is its own kind of language. You live inside it. Your mother says nothing directly. But she increases your portion at supper without comment, and when you catch her looking at you, it's with an expression that has grief in it somewhere, and love. You earn something complicated that you think might be her own memory of her own pregnancies, the ones that lived and the ones that didn't, and the weight of all that history carried in the body. March, and the ground begins to thaw. The first true sign of spring is not visual, it's olfactory. The smell of the field changing as the frost releases its grip on the topsoil, a wet, alive, mineral smell that you associate with the body of the year waking up. Earth smell, root smell, the smell of potential. You've been in this house for 4 months. 4 months of interior, of the world compressed to fire and walls and the turning spindle and Thomas's reading and the slow, careful arithmetic of the grain pot. And now the door opens, literally. You open it, one morning in early March, and the air that comes in has a different temperature than the air inside, and the different temperature means spring, and your whole body responds to it with something that isn't quite joy and isn't quite relief, but is something in between. Something the body does when it's been waiting for a long time and the thing it was waiting for finally arrives. The cow responds too. She angles toward the door, nostril testing the outside air. Not yet, you tell her. She expresses disagreement. Soon, you tell her. The pregnancy changes your experience of the work. The body you knew before is not the body you have now. This sounds obvious, but the reality of it is more specific and strange than the obvious version. Your centre of gravity has shifted. The exact mechanical understanding you had of how to swing a scythe, angle of the hip, position of the hands, the slight rotation that puts power into the stroke, needs recalibrating because the centre of the system has moved. You discover this the first day back in the field. Not disastrously, not in any way anyone needs to help you, just you swing, and the balance is off, and you adjust, and the adjustment is different from what you expected, and you spend the first hour of the first day recalibrating your own body. This is the work. This is always the work. Your body is the instrument, and the instrument changes, and you adapt to the instrument. By noon, you've found the new angle. By the end of the week, you're moving well again. Differently than before, not quite as fast, but the motion is clean, and the ache in your back settles into something manageable rather than something alarming. Marjorie watches this process with the same expressionlessness with which she watches most things. You're compensating with your shoulder, she says one afternoon. I know, you say. It'll cause you trouble in July. I know, you say. I'm trying to fix it. She demonstrates the adjustment. 40 years of working this field in her body, given freely to you in the space of a minute. You try it. It's better. Good, she says, and moves on. April. The planting begins. Planting is different from harvesting. Harvesting is the concentrated crisis, the race against weather and time. Planting is slower, more deliberate. You're working with possibility, not urgency. The strips are ploughed. Will and Thomas doing the ploughing, the ox leaning into the work, the furrows opening in long dark lines across the brown earth. Then you walk the strips and drop the seed. This is work you can do heavily pregnant, and you know this because your mother did it, and her mother did it, and all the way back to however far back the women of this village go they did it. You walk the furrows, and your hand dips into the seed bag at your hip, and the grain falls from your fingers in the particular arc of a practiced sower, not scattered randomly but placed, each grain knowing where it's going because your hand knows where it needs to go. The ground is soft from the spring rains. It gives slightly under your feet. The sun is out. A pale April sun, not warm exactly, but present, actually present, casting actual shadows. You can hear skylarks. They're impossibly high up, invisible against the pale sky, but the sound comes down to you in cascading threads, are complex and repetitive. The sound of birds who've been doing this exact thing over this exact field forever. The field in April, with the ploughing done and the seeding begun, and the sky full of skylarks. This is a different field from the harvest field, from the winter field. This is the field at its most hopeful. It's most like a promise. You walk the furrow. Your hand drops the seed. Maybe enough. Maybe this year, enough. Your son is born on a Thursday in late May, which means Will is gone when it starts because Thursday is the market day, and someone had to go and you were fine when he left. You were fine, you'd been fine all week, and then 3 hours after he left you weren't fine anymore. Your mother has done this before. She knows what to do. She sends Bess for the midwife. Agnes Fowler, who is also named Agnes, who is the midwife for the whole area, who has delivered half the children currently alive in this village. And she puts the fire up, and she puts water on, and she puts you where you need to be, and she talks to you through it in a voice that is not gentle, exactly, but is completely reliable, completely there. The voice of someone who knows what this is and has been through it, and is still standing. Agnes Fowler arrives. She's everything her name and reputation suggest. Efficient, decisive, unfrightened by anything. It takes 6 hours. You won't describe the 6 hours here. The relevant facts are it happens and it's hard, and you do it, and at the end of 6 hours there is a sound in the room that wasn't there before. A sound that is the most extraordinary thing you've ever heard in your life, which is a child's first cry. Your mother puts him in your arms. He's red. He's very small. He has Will's nose, which you notice immediately, and which makes no sense because you can't see Will's nose in this tiny creased face, but somehow you know it anyway. He's crying, and then he stops crying when you hold him, and this feels like an answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. Will comes home from the market to find a son. He stands in the doorway of the house for a moment, taking in what has happened in his absence. His face does something you've never seen it do before, something that is larger than his usual expressions, something that doesn't quite have room to exist behind his normal face, but forces itself there anyway. He comes and sits next to you. He looks at the baby. "What will we call him?" he asks. "You've been thinking about this." "John," you say. "For my father." Will's face does the thing again. "John," he says. "Yes." John is presented to the church on Sunday. Father Edmund baptizes him in the stone font, the same font where you were baptized, the water cold enough that John responds to it with a sound of profound objection. Everyone in the village is there, or feels like everyone, the churchyard full, the sun out for once, people pressing close to see. Father Edmund says the words over John, the formal words, the ancient words. John, son of Will, is written in the parish record. John the living, to be named at Mass every week until he dies or leaves, his existence recorded in this stone building in this stone-bordered land, tied to this place the way everything is tied to this place. You hold him against your chest and he makes a small sound of contentment, and you stand in the May sun in the churchyard and you think, here, this is what it's all for. Not the grain arithmetic, not the Lord's dues, not the long winters and the aching back and the cold mornings. This specific weight in your arms, this specific sound, this specific smell of a new person who is still deciding what kind of person he'll become. Will stands next to you. His hand is warm on your back. You let yourself stay in this moment. Just this moment. Summer comes, and the field comes back, and you work it now with John on your back. This is not unusual. This is how it's always been done. A cloth band, wide and strong, crosses your chest and under your arms and ties at your back, and John lives in it, swaddled and carried, moving with your movement, the rhythm of your body, his first world. He sleeps when you work, mostly. There are mornings when he does not sleep, when he expresses strong and sustained opinions about something, hunger, or the angle of the sun, or some internal register of discomfort that you haven't been able to identify. And those mornings you stop and you deal with him, and then you go back to work. Marjorie, to your left, does not comment on this. She's done it herself 6 times. The skylarks come back. The field turns green, and then gold again. The cycle completes itself. You're going to spend the rest of your life here. This is something you know, and it sits in you differently at different times. Sometimes it sits heavily, sometimes it sits lightly. On this evening in late August, the harvest almost ready, the air warm for once and actually warm, the smell of the ripening grain coming through the window of your house where you're sitting with John in your lap. On this evening it sits lightly. You'll work this field. John will work this field. He'll learn its geography in his body the way you learned it. He'll know the soft spot near the north end and the thin soil along the east side and the corner where the blackthorn hedge comes in. He'll learn to calculate. He'll learn the Lord's arithmetic and the grain pot arithmetic and the thread-selling arithmetic. He'll learn that the world is organized against people like him, and he'll learn how to operate inside that world anyway, with the particular competence and dignity and occasional secret joy that living closely with the land and with people you've known your whole life, that this involves. Maybe he'll find ways you haven't. The world is turning. Things shift. You've heard of villages where men have negotiated changes to the old customary arrangements, where the labour dues are shifting to money rents, where the old bonds are loosening. Maybe. For now, the evening air through the window, John's weight on your lap, the sound of your mother in the back room, and Thomas and Bess and Will coming up the path. You can hear his step, you'd know it anywhere. You think about Edith, who left 6 years ago, who is somewhere out there in the world that isn't here. You don't regret staying. You don't know if you should. What you know is this, the evening, the baby. The smell of August grain, Will's step on the path. These are real, these are yours. There's a hill, not a mountain, just a hill. At the edge of the Lord's woodland, beyond the north field, past the point where the village children aren't supposed to go, but where the village children have always gone, because the point of being a village child is to go exactly where you're not supposed to go. You go there. This is a Sunday in September. The harvest is in, all of it, this year, even the north strips that drowned in the spring wet. Even those came good in the end. And the dues are paid, and the winter preparations are begun, and there is briefly a gap in the urgency. You leave John with your mother, which she receives with complete equanimity, already picking him up before you finished asking. You walk north through the field and through the edge of the wood and up the slope to the hilltop. From up here, the village is very small. You can see the church tower, stone, the newest thing in the village by 100 years, built in your grandfather's grandfather's time. You can see the strips of the field, brown stubbled now after harvest, the boundaries between them visible from up here in a way they aren't when you're standing in them. You can see the path to the mill. You can see the road that goes to the market town. You can see old John's forge, the smoke from it rising vertical in the still air. You can see your house. Your house is very small from up here. The whole world you've been living inside. The world that felt enormous in its daily weight of labour and calculation, and cold mornings and grain arithmetic, and the 1,000 specific textures of its life. From up here it's tiny, comprehensible, small enough to hold in your eye. Beyond it the world continues. Fields, and then more fields, and then the smudge of the next village's smoke on the horizon, and then more distance, and then somewhere far enough away that you can't see it. The market town, and then beyond that the city, and then beyond that the sea, and then the sea itself, and then whatever is across the sea. You stand there in the September light, and you let the wind, which is considerable up here, push through your veil and into your hair and against your face. It's cold. It's beautiful. From here you can see everything you have and everything you are, and also, faintly, the outline of everything you don't have and will never have and might have wanted maybe in some other version of the story. Both things are real. The village below, The smoke rising from your house's fire, which Will has started for the evening, that's real. Yours. The horizon that goes to places you'll never see, that's real too. A different kind of real. You don't choose between them. You live inside both, the way you live inside the grain field, knowing both its soil and the sky above it. You stay on the hill until the light begins to go, which in September means about an hour, the sun dropping fast behind the hills to the west. The shadows come across the fields in long stripes. The light turns gold, then amber. John will be hungry. Your mother will be patient about it, because she's your mother, but John will be hungry. You turn away from the view. You start down the hill. The nights are cold now. You're in your house, in your bed, Will beside you. John in the wooden cradle Will made. A good cradle, well jointed. It doesn't rock unevenly, he got that right. And outside, the first hard frost of autumn is doing its work. You can hear it. Not the frost itself, which is silent, but what it does to the world, the way the air sounds slightly different when it's below freezing, a stillness and clarity that ordinary cold doesn't have, the sound of your own breathing, the quiet of the house settling around the warmth of the fire, which is still going. Tomorrow the field, the autumn work beginning, the preparations, the cycle resuming. But not tonight. Tonight, warm, fed, safe. Your family breathing around you in the dark. Your mother's slow, steady breath from the far corner. Thomas making the sounds of deep sleep. The angular boy sprawled across his part of the bed with the total physical commitment of the deeply asleep. Bess, who has been staying with friends for the week and is back tonight, curled on her side, a warm round shape. Will's breath against your shoulder. John in the cradle, making the small sounds of a sleeping baby. Tiny adjustments, small exhalations, the occasional sigh that is larger than makes sense for something so small. You lie on your back and look at the ceiling which you cannot see because the darkness is absolute. You've been alive for 23 years. You've worked this field for as long as you've had a body capable of working. You've carried water and cut grain and fed fires and spun thread and carried your child on your back through long summer days and made calculations in your head that had real consequences for whether people ate or didn't. You've been afraid and cold and hungry and grieving. You've been warm and fed and held. You've been in the field in the early morning with the skylarks overhead and the mist in the hollows and your hands knowing exactly what to do. You've been on the hilltop with the whole small large world below you and the wind in your hair. This is a life, not the life that the stories are about. Not the Lord's life or the knight's life or the life of the great churchmen in their great stone cathedrals. Not a life that will be written down anywhere except in the parish register. Agnes, daughter of John, wife of Will. But a life, real in every piece of it, heavy and light and cold and warm and hard and occasionally briefly extraordinary. The ceiling you can't see is as real as any ceiling in the world. The warmth of the room is as real as warmth gets. John breathes in the cradle. The fire settles. Will shifts in his sleep, unconsciously closer. Tomorrow will come early. It always does. The bell at the church will call the morning before the light does, because the bell doesn't wait for the light. The bell has its own calendar and its own certainty, and you'll open your eyes to darkness, and your body will do what it does. Remember where it is. Recognize the smell of your own house, the particular quality of this specific darkness, and you'll get up, You'll go to the fire, kneel in the cold, blow the coals back to life, feed them carefully. Watch the orange deepen to white at the centre. You'll deal with the cow who will be waiting. You'll wake the household. The day will begin. The same as yesterday. The same as the day before it. The same as the days stretching out ahead through the winter and back to spring and forward into whatever the year brings. The grain arithmetic, the Lord's mathematics, the cold mornings and the warm evenings and the particular weight of a scythe that fits your hands. John growing, the field, cycling. You, in the middle of all of it, doing what you do, surviving with something more than survival in it, something that doesn't have a word but exists anyway in the space between what is required and what is chosen. The sounds of the village fade. They always do at this hour. The taverns, the one tavern, which is really just a man's house with ale, quiet down. The dogs stop. The wind drops. The darkness outside is the same darkness as the darkness inside. The night is one thing, unbroken. Centuries will pass after this night. The field will change. The strips will be enclosed, consolidated, reorganized by people who never worked them. The village will shrink and grow and change its shape. The church will be rebuilt in parts and kept in parts. Father Edmund's name will be forgotten. Your name will be forgotten. But the field will still be there, under whatever shape it takes. The soil your hands touched is still there. The path to the well is still the path to the well, even if the well is gone. And people will still be lying in the dark at the end of a long day, or feeling the ache of their own specific labour in their hands and their backs and their feet, doing the arithmetic of enough and not enough, listening to the breathing of the people they love. Some things don't change. The body's need for rest at the end of the day, that doesn't change. The particular relief of warmth when the cold has been real, that doesn't change. The way a fire looks when you've built it yourself and it catches, that doesn't change. So let it come. Let the sleep come the way it comes to every tired body at the end of every long day since people have been having days. Let the thoughts slow. Let the arithmetic quiet. Let the cold outside stay outside. Let the warmth of the room do what it does. Hold you. You're warm enough. You're fed enough. You're safe enough. You have a roof that holds and a fire that breathes. And the sound of your child sleeping, and the morning will come when it comes. That's enough. That's more than enough. Let it all go now. The field will wait. The cow will wait. The grain will wait. Everything can wait except this. The long, slow drift down into sleep, into rest, into the darkness that is not a frightening darkness, but the familiar darkness, the darkness that has been yours your whole life, absolute and known. You close your eyes. The church bell somewhere in the village marks the late hour. One stroke, then silence, then just the breathing of the house, the breathing of the people in it, the breathing of the night outside, slow and cold and very old, and you, breathing with it, going down, going down, going down into rest. Good night.